lost you for a minute. So Julie's going to kick this off, and as each of them are required to speak, I will ask them to speak. So, all right. So Julie.
Yeah. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Sitting with me and the Mayor is Megan, May, Donna and Kim, and we are presenting to you on this workshop around the work that we've been doing in recovery, and in particular around prioritisation, and would like to thank you for the opportunity to work with you on what you believe your prioritisation model might be. So just to provide you with a bit of background, sorry, just bear with us a second. Do apologise, just got a few technical issues. Okay, so just to go back over, the four of us were hoping and looking forward to presenting to you an opportunity on how we could work with you on what you as our leaders want around prioritisation for projects. In our terminology, in terms of projects, we're currently thinking that means pretty much everything that the council does. Whether it's infrastructure, OPEX, CAPEX, whether it's a community project, we could possibly use it, but that is something that you will decide as our leaders around what the criteria is for projects. But obviously with the recent COVID-19 events and the requests we received about putting in for more sort of shovel-ready, spade-ready projects, we've got a lot of work that's coming our way, including what we already had on our books. So as part of the recovery thinking, we thought it might be an opportunity to link this prioritisation that you've been wanting as council leaders, and linking it in how we can still focus on the vision that we have around livable, thriving and connected communities. So the purpose of this workshop is, first of all, to seek your approval about building a prioritisation framework to support future decision making on our council projects. And then to seek advice from you as our leaders on what is that criteria for the prioritisation. What do you value most? Don? Okay, so just where our current state is at the moment, you're obviously all well aware about the four well-beings around economic, social, cultural and environmental. And now since COVID-19, we also have the recovery pillars, which in all honesty are very similar. Again, economic, social, built, and the natural outcomes. So these are the considerations that we're being asked to put into place, or the lenses that we're being asked to have with all the work that we do in the future and how we work in the future on the projects and the decision making that we have. So I'm going to hand you over to Kim now that the intro's over, and Kim will go through those pillars.
So just to recap, we did discuss what our goals and objectives were for the four different environments and pillars a wee while ago, but we just wanted to recap on what those goals are, so you can reflect on that when we're talking about the different criteria for prioritisation. So in the economic environment, our goal is to support the businesses within the district to recover and and to ensure our business is fit for purpose to enable the recovery and rebuild. In the social environment, it's our goal is to support the building of resilience within our people and communities. And then we've got the natural environment. So our aim in the natural environment is to protect and enhance the natural environment in support of the district's social and economic recovery. And the goal in the built environment is to support the quick and effective recovery of our communities by stimulating our economy using the built environment. So I think from there, where were we going with that? I think you're next up.
So as part of understanding what are some of the things that we would need to look at if we were putting some of those pillars and the well-beings over our future thinking and your future decision making, is how do we, what is it that we would want to know that would make a difference about us making a yes or a no decision? So we've taken the opportunity of just starting some thinking around some of the questions that you might ask underneath an economic, a natural, a social type of scenario for the work that we do. What we're going to do with you now, if that's okay, is go through the questions that we sent out to you underneath each of those pillars and discuss with you your thoughts, considerations, and any recommendations on any additional questions you would expect to see if we were putting a criteria around each of those pillars on any one particular project that we want to go into, or that you would want to make a decision on. I just want to stop there. Is everybody okay so far? Is there any questions?
Yeah, I've got a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Gabrielle.
Thanks, Julie. Just wondering, with the pillars that you have in the the 4 different coloured pillars, just why you've chosen the 4 and not the cultural. Basically, why is there the built in there and not the cultural?
Oh, okay. I do apologise. The difference is the cultural sits within the well-beings and has always been part of the council's consideration. The 4 pillars are from the recovery pillars, so they sit underneath the recovery, and the decider on that was at central government, and they were the pillars that needed to make. So we're not excluding one for the other, they're just all in addition.
Yeah, okay. So there's just a bit more emphasis on the built at the moment because of the recovery.
Because it sits under the recovery response.
Okay, and you've decided to use those recovery pillars for this particular conversation.
So following, Gabrielle. So
Pardon?
it's the legislation we actually have to required to follow in relation to the recovery are those 4 pillars.
Yeah, so that's what I'm understanding. So at the moment, it seems there's some legislation that you have to follow a recovery model at the moment, as different to the 4 well-beings pre-COVID.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. I just had another question, and if it's too much detail, it's totally fine because I'm just talking as we go. But I'd be curious to know how different the aims are post-COVID than what they would have been pre-COVID.
Pillar, Gabrielle?
Pardon?
The aims of each pillar or the aims overall?
The aims of each pillar that you just went through.
Well, they're very similar in response to the fact they're the same around improving economic and social performance.
Yeah. So is there anything that, other than the word recovery in there, recovery and rebuild, is there anything that jumps out as being quite different than what it would have been pre-COVID?
No.
Okay.
All right. Everybody. So if nobody else has got any other questions.
Pascal's got a question.
Who's got a question? Axel.
Councillor Beck, what's your question, please?
And Sean Jackson's got his hand up as well. Just got a question in regards to, I guess it's a process, like, you know, where does this lead in relationship to setting, you know, priorities for projects overall? So I'm just trying to understand that. So we'll respond to your questions. That gives you a lens with which to look what's currently on on our books, what happens to all the other things that are currently on our book? I just want to understand if the decisions we're making here, in effect, reshuffles the order in which we'll do things, or whether it's just a COVID lens for things that we might sort of pull out alongside or try to do as well as, or what?
From my understanding, and my colleagues might correct me, this is actually your decision as councillors about how you would like to use this tool. Is it for certain things? Is it for all things? We would put, and I think we always have done as a council, looked with those lenses of economic, social and cultural anyway. So it's just a more emphasis on it. But the decision that comes from that will be you and what you want to put into it, what projects or what you deem to be projects that you would want to see in this model. I think that's something that you will start to work out.
I've got a question. Sorry, everybody. We've only got one laptop and we have to move it to be able to actually speak to it. Just further from your question, Councillor Beck, I think this tool will be able to be used moving forward. We've got our current CapEx that we're trying to work through, and I know we had a conversation about how we can deliver that, and we've made some commitments through the LTP. So I think there'd have to be some big decisions made as to if we were going to drop anything off from there. I think moving forward, we all know that we get ad hoc requests to do additional things that weren't on our books. And we're hoping that we can develop a tool that can actually make us or assist us in making decisions, or you making decisions, wherever the decision sits, to determine whether it is beneficial economically, socially, culturally, and where it would sit on that priority table. So what sort of resources should we be throwing at it? Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I just got the feeling that we're sort of looking at that project list through about 3 or 4 different lenses, and I'm just not quite sure where it all came together for the actual decision.
Yeah, so I think this is a tool that can be used moving forward for the more things that keep coming towards us, because we know that they keep coming. Councillor Smith and Councillor Sean Jackson.
I have a question as well, and so does Councillor Smith.
Yeah, I think Sean Jackson was next.
I can't see the screen.
No, look, can I just be one speaker here, and it'll come from me. So as I call your name, please speak. It may not be in the order you think it is. So I'll go with Jan first, please.
Oh, thank you. I just want some clarity here. Are we talking particularly about projects which come to the council, so they're council business projects? They're not necessarily community inspired projects that come out of the woodwork. Is that correct?
Afternoon, Councillor Sedgwick. I think this could potentially be put across all of them. If it requires additional budget or resource from within staff, we need to determine whether these are priorities for us. So it may not require budget, but it may require significant staff resource. And I think as a leadership group, we need to make a decision whether it's important to us to support it or follow through with it. So we're hoping this is what the tool can be used for.
So you may not be able to put this lens across all of these lenses, if you like, across one particular project. So I'm thinking, for instance, with the Te Aute Manui walkway, that would fail on pretty much every economic attribute, but it would pass on many, many of the others. So I'm a little unclear as that this is any project which comes to the council, or any project which we are prepared to take part in some way, whether it's funding or support, funding or support. Am I seeing that right?
Yes, I think there needs to be a threshold determined, and we haven't landed on that yet. So what that threshold is, and I think it's something we've always tried to determine what a project is. But once we land on that, I think potentially we could. For Te Aute Manui, for example, yes, it may not score highly on the economic, but the social and the natural aspects would be quite high.
Thank you. That's just a thought.
Okay, next one is
Sorry, is that me, Alan? You're very... Sorry,
yeah,
Councillor.
Sorry, I'm rather concerned here that we, as a group, with the questions being asked already, have a poor understanding of what we're actually trying to achieve here. So I'm also wondering if this is not a better, the chamber would be a better place to meet with this type of discussion. For me, I'm just feeling very uncomfortable about what we're doing here and the lack of understanding that's been shown already by councillors in going forward. And I appreciated the comments from Giselle as well. So I'm really nervous about what we're doing here. I also am of the view that we're doing this far too early, because as we talked about in an earlier meeting this morning, we've got I forget the word you used, Axel, but it's a skewed situation with the subsidies and everything around. We don't really understand what environment we're going to end up with. We're having best guesses. So what we're actually responding to, and I'm really concerned about knee-jerk reactions here and perceived perverse outcomes which may not eventuate on the longer term. So I'm struggling here to see that that we haven't got the context, that I certainly haven't got it at the moment in which I'm working in this workshop. I don't know, someone help me out, please.
Yeah, Noel, in a perfect world, yeah, I personally myself would rather have you all in front of me in the chamber, and I think it would make it a lot easier. I know it'd make it easier for the presenters here today to actually speak to you face to face, but I think probably what we're doing here is we're giving you a taste of what they're looking at the moment, and I think probably one of the things we need to do is at the next stage is to actually do exactly that and have everybody in the room together and have this discussion. But I think this just gives the staff a little bit of direction, that they're not way off base or something like that. And I'm going to get Eugene to come in at this stage, because Eugene actually was involved in working with the staff with some of this. So I just asked Eugene to give a view from his side.
Yes, thank you, Alan. Yes, I've been working with staff a little bit on this, and these 4 pillars. This is part of the requirements under the recovery process, and this is how they will need to, especially around the economic side of it, creating jobs, etc. And there's still a bit of work I think staff are doing on that, as in how to score it properly. This is, and I think staff, and I do believe too, that in discussions over the last few years, especially when you lead into LTP, that this type of tool could be used really well, working through LTP discussions. How we categorise that into projects, and that there's still work to be done, as Megan or Julie mentioned earlier on. So yeah, I do think this would have been a fantastic workshop to have in the chamber. Especially now that we know that we'll be in there from Monday onwards. Yeah, so that's my thought. So I do believe it's a tool, but there would be a need of a bit of adjustment on actual how it's used in the recovery process and how it's used going ahead in, say, day-to-day business.
Yeah, thanks, Eugene. And I think I go back to the point. This is quite a complex issue, but we have got a prescribed direction that we actually have to take, as much as we mightn't always think it's right, but it is a prescribed prescription. So look, I'm going to go to Sean, and then we probably need to move on, but I will just say that I think when I talked about having it back in the chamber, I'd be suggesting that we find some time as soon as possible to do that, because everybody in here at the moment actually totally agrees with that sentiment. So a very difficult and a complex issue to do it like this at the moment. So Sean.
All right, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep. All right. I'm generally agreeing with what everyone's saying. When I looked at this and I went and sort of basis of an annual plan, and there's an awful lot of information that can go in that. I just wanted to comment around it, going, I think these things, it'd be great to have I like the document, and I think it would be great to have the open discussion about what's going into it. And I think that the livable communities is probably a better lens than the 4 wellbeings. I don't know whether that's an LG, you have to do that for local government objectives, but I do like the process, and I think it'd be really good if it can be held in an open space.
Yeah, thanks for that, Sean. I think everybody's probably in agreement with that too. So, all right, everybody, we'll get, oh, Roger.
Yeah, good afternoon all. I suppose to try and give a bit of context, look, we talked, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks ago now, and we said there were 217 projects on our list of things we still had to deliver that we'd promised our communities. And at the time we said we needed to kind of have a look at what's realistic to actually do, prioritise those. And we also need to look at capacity within delivery of everything on our list. I also described the fact that there was other stuff coming along, whether it was MB stimulus package work, like we've got the 2.5 mil for the wharf, the Raglan Wharf, whether it's all this other stimulus stuff we've put in lists for. So I think where we're at, operationally, next year, we've been planning to basically continue to deliver our CapEx work program as we've done in the past. So we've basically said, okay, what's ready to deliver? What have we got the funding for? What's in this year of the LTP? Who's that project going to sit with? And how are we looking at delivering that in the next 12 months? So that work is a given. However, we've now got COVID, where it's appropriate for us to actually say, is planning our normal forward works program like we've always done the right thing to do right now? And the answer is no, it's not. We need to do that work, so we've got a basis, but then we need to look at it in the context of COVID, what's happening in our communities, where we would actually get better bang for our buck in terms of engaging maybe some local contractors where we wouldn't have done that in that way. Whether there's going to be a project for a particular community that'll really give more benefit to that community now, and we actually weren't looking at doing it in the next 12 months. So what we're trying to do is say, what sort of framework would you put in place to review what's on our books and how you prioritise the work going forward? So the recovery team have been turning their mind to what could that tool or that framework look like. So I don't think councillors should get concerned that we're asking you right now to make some big hard decisions around reprioritising the 217 projects that are on the CapEx list. What we're saying is, at some point in time, and sometime fairly soon, we need to take a step back and say, what were we going to do in the next 12 months? Is that still appropriate? And how do we have that conversation? And so the team are just trying to present today a potential way of having that conversation, and what are the things we need to consider when we're looking at the priority of what we think we're going to do in the next, 12 months, 18, 3 years, etc., moving forward. So I hope that gives a little bit of context to what you're hearing today.
Thanks, Roger. Appreciate that. That's a good explanation of what we're trying to actually achieve here today. So look, we'll move through this on the pretext, everybody, that this is just a taste of what we are required to and need to do. But keep in mind that we will come together, and I will talk to Brendan over the next couple of days around organising a workshop in the chamber to allow this to be facilitated probably in a better way, and get a better outcome that way. So look, I'll hand it back to, who's in the next piece? Julie's doing.
Thank you. So just really to recap on what's been discussed, the reason that you're looking at these slides is we think they might be some of the questions that you might want to ask when you're faced with having to make a decision on which project you want to work with. This list is not exhaustive, it's just some questions that we thought about, but obviously it depends on you as our leaders about what you think are important questions to understand the value of doing a project against what economic outcomes they may be. And the questions that are being asked, and my colleagues will go through each of the pillars on their questions as well, will all be weighted based on what your views are, and then put into a system that will hopefully start to pull out the prioritisation model in the sense of what is important for you to do. So the purpose of this prelim workshop was really, and I know you've had these questions sent out, is to have you to think about, are they questions that you find valuable that would allow you to be better informed about making a decision from an economic perspective? And again, given that we're going to be doing this in a proper workshop environment, I'll just introduce this to you, these questions to you, and then that gives you some thinking time before we get together. So as I said, you may want not to ask them, or you may want to add to it. You may want to understand why we're asking a particular question. But I'll hand over to my colleague and we'll go through, hand over to Kim, and then we'll go through those different projects. Okay.
Wait, am I talking? I thought I was talking about.
Yeah.
I'm doing all of them.
Yeah.
Oh. She doesn't want to pass the laptop around. Okay. So yeah, social ones. Just throwing me under the bus. I haven't read the ones so much about the other environments. So social ones, it's really focusing on those benefits to the community and how they can be helping the community in a social way. As you can see, like a lot of it is how we can be supporting or partnering with the community in delivery of projects. Keep going. Yeah. In the natural environment, it's a little bit more, it's different because it's sort of got more of a technical focus, just because a lot of it revolves around tangible physical effects of the projects and the impacts and outcomes those projects will have in that environmental space. And then cultural, you can see we haven't really added a lot in the cultural space, just because that's none of our areas of expertise so much. We want to make sure we are working on it, but yeah, we want to make sure that that's a wider conversation we have with iwi and other cultural groups. Megan's probably best to talk about the project side of it. I'll pass you around.
So this was these were the sort of parts of, or the information that we thought you probably needed to know regarding what the project was before you were putting the lens over it. So is it critical? And that speaks to our asset renewal. So is it a pipe in the ground that is due for renewal and therefore it needs to be completed, or is it a community garden which could happen or couldn't happen? So there's that sort of risk assessment that needs to be put over all of the projects that runs alongside this. Obviously there's the cost range, and that could be actual financial or resource, as I spoke earlier. The duration of the project, the timing, and also about barriers that might be in place to be able to deliver the project. It's all very well us having aspirations to deliver something, but if there's other barriers such as land availability or legislative issues that are going to stop us from doing it, we need to have them in the back of our mind when we're looking at these things. Let's jump to the next. I do it from here. So originally we had hoped to possibly go back to some of those questions, and based on the fact that we emailed them out, we were going to try and do a session where we look through them and get some feedback on the actual questions. Given that we're going to hopefully meet up again within the next week or so, it may be that we'll just park it. Yeah. Councillor Sedgwick.
Thank you. Just wondering, on the project one, you don't have any indication of accountability, and I know that would normally come through your project management systems, but perhaps that would be wise to put on there who is accountable for the project succeeding.
That's exactly the type of feedback that we wanted, because we've just done a brain dump, and it's a sort of a starter for 6. And so feedback like that is exactly what we're wanting, to make sure that there's all of the considerations, that the things that are important are included. Let's keep going to David. David?
Thank you. The 2 considerations I'd consider important health and safety and beautification. The projects that aren't, I don't know if they're projects, but well, I consider them projects in Huntly that frustrate me, or because they're not being done, and there's good reasons why they're not being done, but they revolve around health and safety being important too, and impacting onto our community, and also what I would consider beautification projects that are, I guess, nice to haves, but don't, again, making things beautiful doesn't, I guess that fits under natural, but it's not an obvious fit, and I don't know where health and safety would fit.
So David, some of those projects could have social impact as well, and potentially economic as well, because by beautifying our towns, it may attract additional business, which contributes to the economic state of that. So I think by putting all of the lenses over all of the projects, like the ones you're talking about, we can get a real good idea as to what impact they would have.
Sure, I'd just like to see beautification and health and safety being on the list of questions. You know, does this project impact health and safety of the public, or does this project beautify the environment?
Perfect, we've made those notes. So, like I say, from here, I guess the next step, we were going to email the questions out to you and ask you to give us scoring on them, but perhaps due to the slight change of move forward, if you can just look at the questions, have another read of them. If you need another copy, feel free to email any of us. We did send out a file note, but if you can just put some thought into the questions, and I think we'd have a really productive workshop in the chambers where we can sort of interact a little bit more easily without having to have the barriers of technology, and really test some of these questions as to whether we're on the right track or whether we're completely off track, I guess. I'll pass you back to Mary Ellen.
Sorry, I've gone off screen here. Okay, all right. Got too many screens running here at the moment. I'm trying to do too many things, running off a totally different system what I've normally used. Okay, so look, oh, that's even better. So let's say that we will look towards a workshop probably in the next 2 weeks. It's not likely to be next week, but it could possibly be Monday week. We could do something. So look, I'll work with Brendan on finding an appropriate date. It probably won't correspond, and that's what I was actually looking at when we came back on. Won't necessarily correspond with an existing meeting, scheduled meeting calendar. So the date I'm potentially looking at where it could be is the afternoon of Monday the 22nd or the morning of the 23rd. So I do have a placeholder for the following day, but it doesn't tell me what it's for. So look, let's put it this way. It'll probably be somewhere in the week of the 22nd to the 23rd or 4th, possibly. So, so just keep that in mind, everybody, and I'll get that sorted out with Brendan and probably firm that up over the next 2 days. Jan?
Will we have capacity for or capabilities for community representatives to dial in, because this is a really convenient way to reach a large number of people who may not be able to spend an entire afternoon driving and talking but want to be involved in it. Is there any update on that?
Well, that would be an issue for Jeff. We're working on technology in the chamber, but what we could do, I'm just sitting there thinking, and I'm certainly no IT expert, but we could have a Zoom that came through me with a panel on my desk, and I could control it that way. Otherwise, it's too broad to do Zoom in the chamber. It's impossible to do. It's just too big. So, but I could be able to do it if I had my device sitting on the desk beside me, and those that want to dial in can dial in through that mechanism, and we can connect the device up to perhaps a microphone or speaker.
It's just really nice to be able to include, I mean, it's been great to see the community boards and committees sitting in on this, and I'd love to keep it going in the most accessible way possible.
I think we all would, and I've said this in the past month or so, Jan, it's certainly a lot easier for us to have people to Zoom in from a distance instead of having to drive all the way to Ngaruawahia, whether that be Sean in the north or Gabrielle out of Ragland or something like that. So yeah, we will see what we can actually do, and I'm pretty sure we can probably find a solution. It may be a bit clunky, but at the end of the day, I'm pretty sure we can get something to work anyway. Right. Where to from here? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Councillor Sedgwick, prior to the workshop when we have it, whether it's the 22nd, 23rd, I don't think there's any problem with you circulating those questions to other community members if you want to get wider feedback, and you bring the additional feedback to the table if you think that's appropriate.
Yes, although I notice we've got Tony Gross, who's chair of Te Kaupapa Community Committee on screen. Thanks, Tony.
Okay. Look, everybody, I think, as I said, oh, hang on, Shelley, where you go?
Thanks, mate. I'm a little bit concerned that we're changing the boundaries of the long-term plan by having the pillars overview of it, because we've been out to the communities, as we do with long-term plans, asking them to give us their wish list. They give us our wish list, and now we're putting different frame on it by introducing the pillars. I find some of the questions that you would like, the staff would like us to answer, I don't find them fitting in with the wish lists of the community and how financial the projects are going to be. I just feel like we're changing the framework a bit.
Eugene?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think we've just got to realise that this is, if you're talking about the LTP, Shelley, and there's projects that the community have desired, and then I don't think we're putting these this framework over top of it and then discarding those because it doesn't fit. This is a new tool which we're trying to develop for going ahead. Plus, it's also one that has to be used in the recovery process. And instead of doubling up and trying to reinvent the wheel again after the recovery process, there's a lot of parts of this that we can use going forward. So, this is a project that's in the development, and probably doing this at this early stage in Zoom has created a bit of difficulty. So having it in a workshop and getting as much feedback as we can into that will help develop a tool that I think is going to be, if you look at all of those questions that that the staff have put up on those 4 pillars there, I mean, they're questions that we ask all the time. We ask those questions all the time. So if there's a good framework to work with it, it's just going to give you a good understanding of the 2 projects on the side, how that works. So
I don't agree with that at all, Eugene. Sorry. I've never thought about projects being job related and how many jobs a project that the community wants would bring in.
Well, just a minute. So when the recovery pillars have to have a relation to jobs and how much jobs it creates. Now, whether we use that as part of the tool, using it for LTP or projects in general, we might decide that we don't want that part of that in that tool when we use it in a different situation. So under the recovery process, jobs is a very important part of that, and that's a part of a requirement that we have to adhere to. So don't get too confused of this tool with recovery and the tool that we want to try to develop for going ahead.
So we're not going out to the public and explaining the recovery pillars, are we?
No.
We're just going to try and blend them into the LTP.
I think you're getting, this is just a tool in the toolbox for us to use effectively, Shelley. So there's others in there, but look, I'm going to get Gavin to speak.
Thanks, Your Worship. So think of it this way, Shelley, there are 217 projects. Which comes first? We don't know. So what we're trying to do is provide a framework that will enable us to, well, not us, but you to decide what is the order that we should be approaching them in. That's the reality of it. The team have put forward a framework And as Eugene said, you may not agree with that framework. You might not like some of the questions. You might take the questions out. You might add new questions. But it will give you a basis on which you can work out how the order in which those projects will be done. That's, you know, that's the essence of what we're doing. It's a framework. It's not trying to change what was put in the LTP. It's trying to work out how best to approach those projects that are in the LTP, which comes first.
Look,
But we used to have all those projects on
Shelley.
the list.
Hang on, Shelley. No, this is about another tool that we actually use to, as Gavin said, is where do they sit within that list? So it's actually prioritising to get the best benefit for it on a floating line setup. So that's effectively what you end up with, because I've seen for years projects that have actually missed out because others have been done and they actually haven't been done in an order that they should have been done in. So this gives the community and ourselves just another tool to look at that 200 and whatever it is projects and to prioritise them and put them on a floating line. That's all it is.
But we used to work out the priority list, Alan, and then Gavin would see how that would work financially.
Yeah, you said we. That's meaning the royal we.
The councillors.
Councillors, yes.
The councillors, sorry.
The new approach now is to work with the community and the community boards to do that. Dorothy.
I've got one question on the projects and that. A community-based project, how would that work? So my question really is on these projects and under these 4 pillars, if we wanted the community to help us do a project, how could, or the funding, but the work wouldn't actually come from the council, but how and where would we go within the council so this could happen? Could it be under that so that we all come together to do a particular project?
Megan, do you want to have a go?
It is, but and that piece of work almost sits outside of this. So we've identified, I think, across all of the 4 pillars and the work that we've been doing, that there's a real opportunity to enable our communities to do some stuff and get it done with us without us getting in the way, basically. Because I know that we can be a little bit of a hindrance. And you know, I've got plenty of examples where we have, I think, slowed down things from happening. So there is another piece of work that's happening to try and look at how we engage with our community groups, how we enable them and support them to do some work in our communities and allow that to happen, because that's certainly a resource that we're not utilising to the best advantage at the moment. But that, yeah, sits outside of this.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Roger.
Yeah, thank you for that. I guess, look, we're in an unusual situation. We don't normally have 217 odd projects on our books. We normally have an orderly list of projects that, yes, we've gone through an LTP. We've done exactly what you've said, Councillor Lynch, in terms of beginning of each year saying, what are we delivering? Can the budgets actually withstand that? But what we're doing is we're saying, well, hold on, let's just stop the bus for a minute. We've got such a long tail on undelivered projects. We now need to have a look at it and say, rather than staff just independently applying their discretion as to which one do they want to start next, or which one looks like something we can easily deliver, we need to now start having conversations with our communities, with yourselves, to say there might be some logic in doing some of them further down the list earlier. And it might have economic benefits to help recover the communities. It might be that the communities actually really value something more than they value something else. There's always going to be a bunch of stuff there that, as a council, it is our role to deliver it. It's basically quality infrastructure, and we need to do certain things to maintain that quality infrastructure. So I think there was a comment, David White, in the chat, you just said, for the workshop, you probably need some more information on what those 217 projects are. And I'd agree with you. So we can go away, we can have a look, and we can chunk those 217 down to things that council does as BAU. So we maintain our assets, we might be putting in a pipeline. That's not a project the community probably wants to talk about, help manage, or even know about. So we'll say, here's a bunch of stuff that we just need to get on and do. We will communicate with our communities when we're doing it and why we're doing it, but ultimately it's just part of running our business. There'll then be a bunch of projects which are historical LTP things, which communities have been waiting for and are getting quite frustrated that we haven't delivered. And those are the ones where I think we've got real value to say, are they still a worthy project in the order of what's going on at the moment? And should we try and put them to the top of the list? And what would it take to actually deliver them sooner than we were envisaging? So, Councillor Lynch, we're not reinventing the LTP process. We're not chucking everything out. What we're doing is just simply saying we need to have a careful think about what order we do it in, and it probably isn't appropriate for staff to make those decisions in isolation anymore.
Look, can I just say what Roger's described for me is what we call discretionary projects. So anything that's in reference to maintenance or renewal, which has connotations in relation to our core infrastructure, those are not the projects we're talking about. These are the true discretionary projects that we have across the whole district and within our community. And those are the ones that the community are passionate about. So I think Roger's right. The ones we should be looking at are those ones, not the everyday maintenance work that goes on within our district. So I'll go to Jackie next.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I agree. Thank you, Roger. I think that's helping to clarify it for all. I hear what Councillor Lynch is saying. I think this framework is, as you say, one of the toolkits, how I understand it. So we've got our livable, thriving, connected communities, and that's where we're going along. Underneath that, we've got other things going on. We've got the blueprinting, checking our long-term plan project list. We've got the COVID, the effects of COVID, and also therefore the recovery process that we want to put that as a framework as well. Over that, we've got shovel-ready projects, and some of these we've actually got funding, which is fantastic, like at Raglan. So we're really just putting these into line, and I guess that transparency of what opportunities we've got under that framework, and how do we then all of us understand it, because if there is movement, then we need to all be understanding that, including our communities. So I think it's exciting going forward, and I liked also what Megan said around, you're also at the same time, what I understand is trying to do a framework for once you've got a work schedule, other things always come up, there's opportunities, and how do we manage those opportunities within the framework of a work schedule that doesn't have any capacity because you fill the capacity up. So that's part of this work, I understand from what the...
Yes, yeah, it is.
I think these are all good things. And the only concern I have with this is, look, it's great having the community boards and community committees and board. I believe that the more people can have that input, the better the scoping. However, there's other communities who have strategic projects, and I think if Councillor Smith, I can't see him, was here, he mentioned one the other day around a community facility in his ward, and like Mercer's got another community facility in theirs. They're not community board areas, they're not community committee areas, they're rural areas that have strategically important projects. So just flagging for this conversation as to how we support and manage some of those ones as well within this framework, just so that we hear those voices as well.
All right. Look, I just think, I suppose something I've learnt over the years that, with different LTPs and annual plans prior to doing LTPs, and dare I say it, I can remember back to those old days when we did that every year. But at the end of the day, sometimes a project that is on our books and doesn't get done for a couple of years, all of a sudden is no longer relevant over time, and our mindset or community mindset changes. So I think the important around taking a stock take on what we actually have, providing you use the right tools and with the right people in the room, having that discussion, I think we'll get a far better outcome. But I think more importantly for the staff, as I've said, as Megan said, staff select from that list. Well, in all honesty, probably that's the responsibility of the politicians to give them that list in a priority order, and that's exactly what we're trying to do on that floating line concept. So I think this is just a tool in the toolbox to use and something to measure it against. But it is complex, and I think it will come down to what we actually consider as individuals as to what we think is a priority to my community, and I lean towards the councillors and community board members rather than myself, because I cover the whole district. So I'm probably the one that'll have the priority over the major infrastructure and stuff like that. So it will be up to the rest of you to actually indicate what is important, whether that's in Tuakau, Huntly, Ngaruahi, or Raglan, or it doesn't matter where it is, that what is important to that community, and then put a ranking, a little bit like STV voting. So let's rank them and see where they sit within that. All right. Is everybody, oh, Axel.
Yeah, just wanted to make a comment. I've struggled to see how this tool works at this time, and I know the important work that Roger's got ahead of him in terms of trying to prioritise the list. I couldn't quite make this tool fit because it's just another lens, and Gabriel started us off reminding us that there are more pillars that in a non-recovery, normal sense are important too. So where I've got to, I think, is that this is probably a useful tool as advertised. What it said on the box is as a recovery lens, right?
Yep.
And we're trying to stretch it to do more than that. So I would see it's useful to develop this tool to look through the 217 projects, Roger, and pull out the ones that could be useful from a recovery perspective. But that's the end of the use of that tool. It's a recovery lens, and we cast it over the list that's there, but then we go back to our normal lenses, our normal processes, which is your point, Councillor Lynch, for the rest of the LTP projects.
Okay, Gabrielle.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Axel. I think to me there sounds like there's two things happening here. There's the recovery lens that has to be used in some way. But there's also, it sounds like the council could do with a better process to prioritise discretionary projects, anyway, from what I hear and what I've understood. So I think maybe they need to be worked on as two separate pieces of work, because it's a little bit confusing. I think in a way there are other lenses perhaps that we should be using, like a climate action lens and a housing issue affordability. Like, shouldn't we be taking like the 5 biggest issues across the whole of the district and the national and even global, and like think about those being our lenses? I understand COVID's a very immediate lens, but we have some other pretty big issues as well. So to me, there's lenses, and then the pillars are just categories. Really, to me, it's a way of categorizing where something sits. But then what you're trying to develop is a priority. There's actually kind of 3 things, there's your pillars, your categories, your lenses, and then the way you prioritize. And there's 3 pieces of work, and in a way that needs to be very clear. And I think, yeah, I think they actually all need to be worked on at the same time.
We can only do what we can do, Gabrielle. The last thing I want to do is make this thing bigger than what we can actually handle in one bite. All right, has anybody else got any other thoughts before we sign out? I've got somebody with a hand up. Who's that? Oh, Rick. Sorry, Rick.
Yeah, thanks for that. This is a really good discussion. I've got to say that as a result of all the discussion, I think things are a bit clearer in my mind. One thing I'll just pick up from my perspective, and that's, while I agree that we need to look at those projects, I would say my advice for Roger is, sure, take out the ones which are the standard infrastructure things that you're talking about, putting in pipelines, that kind of stuff, because as you say, for the most part, in my view, community committees and boards, probably that's kind of business as usual. It's stuff that either has to be done or it doesn't have to be done. But rather than leaving it up to you, Roger, or the rest of the staff to then determine which of the other projects best fit those, whether we're calling the pillars or the lenses or whatever, maybe leave that to the community boards and committees to make some recommendations as they relate to their own community. And the reason I say that is it could well be that council staff might think, hey, this doesn't really fit but actually our view might be a little bit different. We might see things in a different way. So I'd quite like, I want to be part of the process, and we want to make it as easy as we can. I agree with you, Alan, but if we can get the community board engaged, those board and community engagement, those that want to engage, that can actually help narrow down that huge list that the councillors have got to consider, and you can then have the input from the communities, so they can help prioritise.
Yeah, look, I agree with your sentiment there, Rick. I think that's probably where I'm coming from too. I think it's about us dispersing it back from here to the communities to actually do that prioritisation. They may actually take some out and they may add some in, and that's purely at their discretion. And I think it would make our job a hell of a lot easier if that was actually done by the relevant communities instead of us having to do it, because we'll never get it right because it'll be out of sync with what you're thinking. So yeah, that's sort of where I'm coming from as well. All right, nobody else is flagging away at me, so I just thank everybody for the workshop this afternoon. And yes, I'll get Brendan to, and I'll have a talk to Brendan and get something sorted out, but probably in a couple of weeks' time, 2 to 3 weeks' time, we'll have another workshop, but I think we'll do it in the chamber, but we'll also do it in a way that allows those that want to zoom in can do it. As I said, it may be a little bit clunky, but I think probably, as we've all had to do through this process, we've learned ways to adapt and to do things, and we've all accepted the clunkiness of using Zoom in whichever form. So yeah, so thanks very much, everybody, and we'll catch you all again. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Awesome.